today to have the pleasure of having Delegate Mizeur here as our keynote speaker. She has served in the Maryland General Assembly since 2007. She represents District 20 in Montgomery County. She has been a strong and successful champion for expanding health coverage, supporting public education, creating jobs, and protecting Maryland's environment from unregulated fracking. In addition to these efforts, she has been a powerful advocate for the LGBT equality. As one of 8 openly gay members of the General Assembly, she helped lead the charge to win marriage equality in the legislature and at the ballot box, including her impassioned speech on the House floor. During the debate that garnered national attention for its persuasiveness, she's a strong champion for LGBT equality and for Western Marylanders. She's even being talked about as a potential candidate for governor next year. And I sure hope she runs, because I sure as heck will be voting for her. Please join me in welcoming Delegate Heather Mizeur.
All spread out so far. This is a little bit of a challenge, but I trust that you can hear me okay. I grew up in a small town in rural Illinois. 1,100 people. That was if you counted the chickens and the dogs and cats. And it wasn't a very friendly place to be a little lesbian girl. But times are changing. And when I look at our community in Montgomery County, where I live and have chosen to live as an adult, in Tacoma Park, I have a couple of stories to share with you about Tacoma Park. I'm going to tie it back together to Illinois before it's all over. So in Tacoma Park, where I live, one of my neighbors had a little boy who, at the end of his school day, she was driving him home from school, and she noticed in the back seat that he was crying and, well, sort of tearing up. And she asked him, "Ben, what's wrong, sweetie?" And he said, "Well, Emma told me at school today that she's not going to marry me." And my neighbor Joanna explained to him that there would be many people he would fall in love with over the course of his life, and it would be okay. And then he really started to cry, and he said, "But Jordan told me he's marrying Aiden, and I'm left with no good choices." And his mom, of course, laughed and still put her arm around him. And this is part of Tacoma Park. This is the beauty of communities that come together to support diversity, where parents are encouraging their children to love whomever it is that they fall in love with. And you're allowed to clap while I'm talking, yes. And in Tacoma Park, when I ran for the city council initially, I was knocking on doors and introducing myself. I served on the city council before I was elected to the General Assembly 7 years ago. And I was told by one of the women who I knocked on the doors, she said, "You know, I like you and I think you're the more qualified candidate in the race, but I'm going to support the other candidate for diversity because he's Latino." And I said, "Oh, that's great. It's a wonderful reason to make a decision to support diversity. I just want to make sure that you also know that I'm a diversity candidate as well. I'm openly lesbian." And she started busting up laughing. She said, "Oh, come on, Heather, that doesn't count as diversity in Tacoma Park anymore." And you know what? It's not just Tacoma Park anymore that has the welcome mat out to our community. We are building support in every corner of this state to love and honor and cherish equality and to support all love and all the beauty of all relationships. When we won marriage equality here in Maryland, it wasn't a campaign that we won once. We had to win it twice. We had to win it in the General Assembly, and then we had to win it again at the ballot box where you had a say. And I'm going to talk about both of those. First of all, I want to thank everyone who is 22 to 13 years old who's here, particularly. Because I can tell you that the reason why we won marriage equality in the House of Delegates was because of the courage of the high school and college age kids who shamed their parents, my colleagues, into voting the right way. I had no fewer than 5 of my colleagues tell me, that they supported marriage equality because their high school and college age kids shamed them into it. Looked at them and said, "What do you mean you don't support equality, Mom? Come on, Dad, what's your problem?" And we only won by 2 votes. That came down to a very, very poignant place where I can tell you, I want to bring you inside the curtain on some of the conversations that were happening leading up to that vote. One of my colleagues who was still undecided on the night before we went to the floor, we still knew that we were at least 1 vote short. And I asked to have a conversation with him in the members' lounge behind the House floor where we started to talk about this issue. And he was giving me all the political reasons why he couldn't support it. He thought it was too tough in his district. He pulled out a piece of paper to show that he had gotten some calls from cardinals in the Vatican in Rome, and he represents a very strongly Catholic area, and he felt like he just couldn't do it. And I kept trying to win the conversation with him on policy points. And then I decided that we just needed to have a heart conversation. And I just stopped the conversation by saying, "You know what, John? At the end of the day, what you are telling me is that you and your wife deserve rights that my wife and I don't deserve." And he stopped. And he was like, "Well, I'm not saying that." And I said, "Yes, you are. That's exactly what you're saying if you don't support equality. But more importantly, I'm just going to ask you to do one thing, John. Go home and talk to your kids. Talk to your high school and college age kids." He has three kids in that age range. I said, "Just talk to them and listen to what they have to say. They're going to want their father to be on the right side of history." The next morning at 6 a.m., this colleague texted the Speaker of the House saying he would be the deciding 71st vote. Now, unfortunately, the Speaker of the House doesn't receive text messages and didn't know how to read it. So we didn't know that we had that vote lined up, and we spent the whole next day scrambling to get yet another vote lined up. So we ended up with 1 to spare. We won with 72 votes. But it was definitely such an amazing moment. One of the conversations that I had on the House floor when we were debating this bill was just we all tell our stories, right? We grow in momentum and support and understanding of our community when we are who we are, and we help people to understand what our relationships are about and how we need to be treated equally under the law. One of the things that I think connected most with my colleagues was when I reminded them that they couldn't stop me and my wife from being in love. The one thing that those opponents of marriage equality at the time wanted to do was the one thing they can't stop us from doing. They can't stop us from pledging vows of love and commitment to forever to each other. They can't stop our relationships from existing. They can't keep us from loving each other. All they can do is make it really, really hard for us in life's toughest times. Because what marriage equality does is protect us equally under the law in the toughest of moments. If I were in a car accident with my wife and we had to ride in an ambulance to the hospital, would she be able to ride with me, or would she be seen as a legal stranger? When we got to the hospital, could she make a life or death medical decision on my behalf? If I were to pass, would she be able to claim my body for burial? Would she be treated fairly under the inheritance laws in allowing my half of the home to go to her without having a huge tax bill? All of these are the issues of protecting a relationship that we were seeking under this law. And when we finally won, we had a bill signing ceremony, but before the bill signing ceremony started, the governor had a group of us up in the governor's reception to have a quiet moment of reflection and to share thoughts and enthusiasm about what we had accomplished. And when it was my turn and the microphone was handed to me, I just started jumping up and down saying, "We did it, we did it, we did it." We all should jump up and down. Come on, we did it, we did it, we did it, right? Jump up and down. Feel that support and that pride in your heart, because because we did something absolutely amazing. And we didn't just do it in the General Assembly, we did it with you and your help, because it was taken into a conversation in every single living room and on every ballot box in this state where you had an opportunity to make a decision about where you stood on equality as well. When we show our pride and show our courage, we help make things happen. That little town I grew up in is the same town where my sister and her 3 children live. And 7 years ago, when my wife and I got married, we had all of our nieces as our flower girls. And the oldest niece at the time was 7 years old, and she was on a trampoline with one of her best friends in the backyard, and my sister overhears a conversation between the two of them. They're jumping up and down on the trampoline, and Gracie says to her friend Mackenzie that she and her sister Anna are leaving next week to be flower girls in her Auntie Heather and her Auntie Doub's wedding. And Mackenzie stops on the trampoline, and she looks at Gracie and she said, "Auntie Heather and Auntie Doub's wedding? 2 girls?" And Gracie said, "Yeah, they're in love. They're getting married. It's awesome." Mackenzie thought about it for a second, and she goes, "Oh, here comes the bride, here comes the bride. I get it." And they just started to jump again on the trampoline, right? Because that's how children see the world. They're only going to see love and truth and beauty. They have to be shown something else. And thankfully, in a community like where I grew up, where it was not a friendly place to be a young gay and lesbian kid, that's changing too. And it's because we're all standing up to show our pride and courage. One of my favorite authors is a woman named Marianne Williamson. I want to share a paraphrase with you as I'm closing on, I think, some of the most beautiful words of wisdom that I reflect on a regular basis. Marianne Williamson says that our greatest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our greatest fear is that we're powerful beyond measure. We ask ourselves, who am I to be talented and gorgeous, fabulous and amazing? Actually, who are you not to be? You were born to make manifest the glory of God that is inside of you. And when you allow that light to shine, you unconsciously give permission to everybody else to do the same. Hagerstown, Washington County, you're allowing your light to shine today. You're coming together to show your pride, to join up together in community, to celebrate our successes, and to take stock of what we have left to do. It's not enough for us to say that we have 12 states and counting and that we're going to be on a full march for marriage equality. We also have to stand up and protect our transgender brothers and sisters and make sure that we pass legislation that protects them in public housing accommodation and employment. We have to stand up and fight against bullying of our teens and youth. But the other thing that I think is really incumbent upon our community is that we don't just pocket these victories for ourselves and celebrate and say that we've won. We have to work together in coalition with all the people who came together. We didn't win marriage equality just because the gay community came out in force and said that we should be treated the same under the law. We won by putting coalitions together, regardless of party affiliation, regardless of where you lived in this state, regardless of what your faith tradition was. We stitched together a winning coalition of people that believed in justice and fairness and equality. And we have to return that favor on a range of issues that are still providing inequality in Maryland. We still have 300,000 children who go to bed hungry every night. We have 7,000 people with developmental disabilities on a waiting list for services. We have 4,000 families whose children have autism that are seeking help from the state, but they're on a waiting list too. We have middle-class jobs we have to protect. We have to grow the economy to connect with our small businesses and continue to help Maryland live up to her full, vibrant potential. And we're only able to do that when we continue to build these coalitions, work with our friends who have honored us in our relationships, and for us to stand up and say, it's our turn to pay it back. Thank you for what you've done to support us and treat us fairly under the law. And now that we don't have to be spending time trying to defend ourselves legally, we have new time and energy to devote to these other purposes, to continuing to making our communities the best and strongest that they can be. And so, congratulations for coming together. Anna, for your wisdom and insight in the importance of bringing community together so that we can stitch these relationships together and be strong. Everyone should clap right now and give Anna a big hand. And while you're here today, on top of getting to know each other and what our own dreams and desires are for the future, please make yourselves aware of all the resources that are available in our communities. The Frederick Gay and Lesbian Center is here. We have a range of community organizations that are here. We have so many friends and neighbors that aren't here today that should be. Let's make a pact to bring out more people next year and to reach out to them throughout the year so that everyone knows how much they are loved, how beautiful they are, how powerful they are, to stand up and fight for our communities and hold each other up for a bigger, better, brighter tomorrow. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here with you today.